The notification chimed softly in Professor ZYX Thala's neural implant as she reviewed the semester roster for Advanced Galactic History. Her tentacles twitched nervously when she spotted the entry: Human Student Exchange Program War Counselor Assignment, pending. She immediately contacted the Academy's Administrative Corps. "There's been an error in my class assignment. A human student has been enrolled without proper supervision protocols." The response came back within nanoseconds. "No error detected. Human student Marcus Chen cleared for enrollment. War Counselor Veltar has been assigned. All safety measures implemented." ZYX Thala's chromatophores flickered an anxious purple. She had heard the stories, but assumed they were exaggerated. Surely the tales of human reactions to historical education were mere propaganda from the more xenophobic species. The first day of class arrived with unusual fanfare. Security drones hovered discreetly in the corners, their sensors calibrated specifically for human biosignatures. War Counselor Veltar, a massive Krexnari veteran with ceremonial battle scars, positioned himself strategically near the human student. Marcus appeared ordinary enough, average height by human standards, brown hair, wearing the standard academy uniform. He smiled politely at his classmates, a mix of crystalline Vortak, gaseous nebulan entities, and several other species from across the galaxy. "Today we begin with the pacification wars of the Third Spiral Arm," Professor ZYX Thala announced, her voice steady despite her concerns. "These conflicts represent a typical example of territorial expansion through diplomatic annexation." She activated the holographic display, showing star systems changing colors as civilizations were absorbed into larger hegemonies. The Maldoran Empire expanded across 47 systems over 3 centuries through strategic negotiations and economic pressure. Casualties were minimal, only 2.3 million beings across all conflicts. A soft growling sound emerged from the human section of the classroom. Marcus had leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped his data pad. "Excuse me, Professor," Marcus said, his voice carrying a strange intensity. "Did you say 2.3 million casualties were considered minimal?" War Counselor Veltar placed a restraining hand on Marcus's shoulder, but the human continued. "And this was considered a peaceful expansion? They conquered 47 star systems and killed over 2 million people, and this is taught as diplomacy." The Vortak students' crystalline bodies chimed nervously. Several nebulan entities began to dissipate at the edges, a clear sign of distress. "The Maldorians offered generous terms," Professor ZYX Thala explained carefully, noting how Veltar was now fully alert. "Most civilizations accepted integration rather than face total war. By galactic standards, this was remarkably bloodless." Marcus stood up abruptly, causing the security drones to descend several inches. "Bloodless? Professor, where I come from, we call this genocide with extra steps. You're describing systematic conquest and calling it diplomacy." "Mr. Chen," Veltar rumbled in his deep voice, "perhaps we should review the human historical perspective during our counseling session." "No, I want to understand this now," Marcus insisted, his voice rising. "How many species just accepted extinction rather than fight? How many entire cultures were erased because they thought cooperation would save them?" The classroom had gone completely silent. Professor ZYX Thala realized with growing horror that the human wasn't just upset. He was analyzing the conflicts through a completely different lens. "In human history," Marcus continued, his eyes bright with a terrifying intensity, "we learned that appeasement doesn't work. We learned that sometimes you have to fight, even when the odds are impossible. We learned that survival sometimes requires making choices that civilized beings shouldn't have to make." He turned to his classmates, many of whom were now backing away. "Don't you see? Every single one of these peaceful annexations could have been stopped if just one species had fought back effectively. if they had studied human military doctrine, if they had been willing to make the sacrifices necessary for survival. Shun. Veltar's voice boomed across the classroom. Counseling session. Now. As the war counselor escorted Marcus from the room, the human called back over his shoulder. Professor, for homework, maybe the class should study the siege of Stalingrad. Or the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. See what real resistance looks like. After they left, Professor Zwiak stood in stunned silence. Around the classroom, students were exhibiting various signs of psychological distress. The Vortak were chiming discordantly, the Nebulans had partially dispersed, and several other species were showing signs of existential crisis. She now understood why the regulations existed. Humans didn't just learn history, they weaponized it. They saw every peaceful surrender as a failure of imagination, every diplomatic solution as a missed opportunity for resistance. They looked at the galaxy's most celebrated examples of civilized conflict resolution and saw only cowardice and collaboration. That evening, Professor Zwiak filed her report. Human students successfully contained. War counselor protocols effective. Recommend additional psychological support for affected classmates. Note: human historical perspective remains fundamentally incompatible with standard galactic educational frameworks. The next semester, the Academy implemented new regulations. The human exchange program would continue, but history classes would require specialized curriculum designed specifically for species with aggressive analytical tendencies. They never did explain to the humans why they were the only species that needed a war counselor just to attend history class. Some truths, the Academy decided, were too dangerous for even humans to fully comprehend.